Welcome back to the WTS podcast. The gimmick here is pretty simple. I talk to the most creative artists and makers I can find, interesting people with unique visions and perspectives. And if you enjoy the WTS, please consider supporting it by becoming a WTS Plus member at patreon.com/thewts. You'll get access to the unedited video recording of each episode. So you'll be able to see how many fingers I'm holding up right now. And also, you'll get to see this cool WTS sticker that I send out to everybody who signs up. That's over at patreon.com/thewts. So it's been 6 months since Jon Grim joined me on the podcast. I bet you didn't think it had been that long, did you?
No, definitely. Time flies.
Jon is a graffiti artist and graffiti teacher whose videos transcend mere education and touch upon other topics in the world of art, or even the philosophy of art. If you didn't listen to his episode back in June, check it out. It's no joke, one of my top 5 favorite episodes I've ever done. Hey, Jon, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's always a good time.
So, in the whole history of this show, there's only been 2 people that have generated a few salty responses. The first one is Cam Anderson. He's this guy who just makes things out of epoxy, and epoxy just pushes people's buttons. And the second person was you. Some people contacted me or left comments saying, one guy said he absolutely refused to even listen to the episode because I guess he has this fundamental misunderstanding that graffiti art can only be destructive and illegal. Even though that's the exact thing that we touched on and addressed during that show.
It's a common misconception. I even get it on my own videos.
It's weird that people would refuse to listen to something based on basically ignorance, that they just don't understand something. And I think that's the thing, is that you fear something. The best way to combat fear is through education, just by learning about something, because fear really breeds hate. When people say they hate something, really what they do is they fear something because they just don't understand it. But here we are. We're here to educate people on this damn show. Man, you had quite a fun time with your channel recently, huh?
Yeah. Oh man, it's been a roller coaster. That's putting it lightly. The past month and a half has been a roller coaster.
That's like every YouTuber's worst nightmare, is to have your entire channel gone. So what happened? Did you just wake up in the morning and nothing's there?
So I remember it very clearly. It was December 5th, and I woke up, did my usual morning routine, didn't get the best sleep the night before, so I took a little bit of a nap. And when I woke up, I had all these notifications on different social medias from people saying, "Hey, I think your channel might be hacked." So obviously, I checked it out. I ran to the channel to see what was happening, and I saw 3 different streams doing extremely well that weren't mine. They were from Tesla events, I think was the channel name that they changed it to, and they were promoting some kind of crypto scam, which I'm not going to pretend to even understand.
Nobody understands crypto.
Yeah, I have no idea. So they were promoting something of the sort. And YouTube saw it after a couple of hours. They saw it and they just knocked the channel out.
Yeah.
And that maybe that took a day or two. It might have taken a day or two. Regardless, end result, channel got knocked out, and they deleted it. Luckily for me, YouTube deleting a channel is the equivalent of somebody dragging a file and putting it in a trash bin.
Yeah.
And just leaving it there. So I was able to get it back, but it's really interesting because when you go to your Google profile, you can actually look at your Google activity, and it tracks changes made to your account and the timestamps of those changes. And I had all the precautions, like 2-step authenticator, all that stuff. And you can actively see the hacker just disable it. Not that they got past it, but they just apparently turned it off, which I don't know how they're able to do that, but
yeah, I thought 2-step authentication was supposed to prevent all of this.
Yeah, I guess it's better for amateur hackers, people who don't really know what they're doing.
Oh man, that's scary. So, but the upshot is, after a lot of wrangling back and forth with YouTube, you got it all back, huh?
Yeah, on December 15th, so 10 days it took of YouTube finagling around in order to get it back. It was a long process. And apparently, there's like two different types of scams the hackers run where they target content creators specifically. And in both variations, they pretend to be a sponsor. And, that's kind of how they bait you in.
So they emailed you and said, hey, we would like for you to sponsor a thing. You click on a link, and then somehow it just goes all the shit there. Yeah,
pretty much.
I know. You mentioned in your video, you're like second guessing yourself whether you want to do any sponsored spots in the future.
Yeah. Unless it's like from like obviously a notable company and you can verify its legitimacy. I'm sure you get a lot of offers from these smaller companies
every day. I get like these Chinese tool companies and stuff, and it's in the morning and it's really poorly written, and I don't
spelling mistakes everywhere.
I can tell just by looking at the subject. I don't even need to open it.
Yeah.
Like, no.
There's a lot of, for lack of a better term, there's a lot of nonsensical like sponsor offers that you'll just get, and you ignore the majority of them, and then you get some where like something about it just piques your interest. So you open the email and you might look at it and they might say something that, seems a little interesting. Maybe in my case, maybe they're promoting markers and the markers look like they might be something my fan base might be interested in. And it may not be like the most reputable company, but it's like, all right, maybe it's, it's something to look at.
Yeah.
And then you just get baited into it. But after that, I look at these opportunities and I'm like, it's not even worth it. I'm not losing my whole channel over a pack of markers,
Yeah. I think you need like an ad rep or a sponsor rep who can find these deals for you. I'll see if I can hook you up with somebody, because then you don't have to deal with all of these people.
That'd be great.
I want to do a throwy. I want to make a graffiti right here of my logo, that logo right there, the WWMM, because I'm gonna. It's time January. I want to like reorganize my shop, but what I want to do is I want to spray paint a really cool. I had one on there like 5 or 6 years ago. I spray painted, but it was really toy.
I'll tell you what, the letter W is like seen as one of the hardest letters in graffiti, hands down. So having two of them back to back,
it's like one up and one down. I know.
Yeah, it's immediately like, all right, we're in for a treat here. Yeah.
It's gonna look bad no matter what I do, huh? Is there a way? How would I do? Say if you were to do that logo, make my logo into just a really cool piece of art right there. What would you do?
We're talking a throwy?
Yeah.
All right, so for a throwy specifically, you really want to prioritize the management of negative space between the actual letters themselves and within the letter itself, right? So those letters, all four of them, would be right up against one another in order to minimize the amount of negative space. And that would, like, by far be the priority, because that's going to allow the lines of each letter to get closer to one another. That way they have a sense of uniformity and flow with each other. So that would be the first thing. It wouldn't look much the same.
No, I don't want it to look exactly like that. It's a stylized version of my logo is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, so there would be challenges because W is not the easiest letter, but it would have that same...
It's because you can't really make it like rounded, right? That's
exactly what
straight lines. Doing. Yeah. Oh, you would curve it up a little bit.
Yeah, it would definitely be rounded because that makes the management of negative space a lot easier. Once you start introducing angles and all that, you start to push things further away, and you also start to build more letter structure. That's really the big issue with angles in throwies. It's possible you can add angles in throwies, but when you start to add angles in throwies, you begin to incorporate more letter structure, which then makes it look more like a straight letter as opposed to a throwy. So to avoid that, there would definitely be more rounded edges, and I would do exactly what your logo has done, where I would make the W's and then I would flip them over so like that they're identical. And then I would make very slight alterations. That way we do like maintain that more M aesthetic for the throwy. And, we still have that uniformity between the W's and the M's.
If you made one of those for me, just drew it out. Yeah. Would I be able to like somehow transfer that just by maybe making a grid or something, just drawing it on the wall?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't know if you have access to a projector, but that would be an option.
I don't know where to get a projector. I guess maybe like Goodwill, or like they might have some used projectors or something.
They have so many like really affordable
like
and
an
cheap options out there.
overhead projector or something like they used to have in science class.
I feel like that'd be really dedicated in order to have. I don't know.
I don't know how I would get a projector.
They were massive, they had these massive projectors with like the reflective light and all that.
Yeah. No, what would be a regular kind of projector that you would use for something like that?
So, I have a projector, really tiny thing.
Oh, it
I don't know
is.
the name of it. Let's see. Actually, lucky enough, I have it right behind me.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, so this actually works out perfectly. And this thing. At the time of buying it was, I believe, $300, and that was over 10 years ago.
Oh.
So now at this point, if you got the very same one, it'd be really cheap. It's a Brookstone.
Oh, Brookstone
projector.
Sure. So what do? You plug a phone into it or something, or do you?
Well, this one's a little ancient in regards as technology is concerned, right? I'm pretty sure they have better connections in the back.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Right. So they probably have something a little bit more up to date that would more easily connect into a computer or something. But it even has a little tripod screw on there that you can.
Oh, that's what I need. That's what I need right there.
Yeah, you can easily mount it and then do whatever it is you have to do. So if you had access to a projector, I can easily sketch one for you.
And man, that'd be awesome. That would be so. I could have a Jon Grim original right here in my shop. Yeah. That would be cool.
And if you couldn't get a projector and you needed a grid, I would walk you through the steps of like setting up a grid.
Let's do it. This is gonna be cool. I like putting people on the spot here now.
Yeah, I don't mind. I would 100%. Again, walk you through the steps of making the grid and all that, and seeing to it that it comes out.
Any progress? Any more progress on the graffiti wall you were talking about making?
No. Right after you sent me is it safe to call it a schematic? Is that
yeah, I guess it's just like it's a SketchUp is the program. It's a free program, and I just kind of drew it out in there how it might work.
It's a free
It's free.
I'm not gonna lie. You sent me the the initial SketchUp of it, and I was taken back. I was like, holy crap! This looks really professional. This is great.
Oh no, I love using that. It's a 3D rendering. It's basically a CAD software, except it's free. It's online, and so you can just draw these amazing 3D. And I've used it for 10 years now for everything I make, and it helps me to really visualize things.
From like a consumer standpoint, we'll go ahead and say, it was mind-boggling. I don't know if like clients you had felt the same, but like receiving that, I was like, well, holy crap, the professionalism is crazy. Because I sent you over like some rinky-dink sketches I had done on Photoshop, and I'm like, all right, this looks good. Send it over, and you immediately shoot over some 3D images.
Well, see, I can't draw. I can't pencil and paper. It would look like a stick figure. I can't do that at all.
Well, this definitely works. But for the wall,
what this is you're wanting a wall that you can take up and put back up, portable. You can set it aside, and that you can use just for graffiti.
Yeah, and even like maneuver it around a little bit if I need to.
Yeah.
So once you had sent me that over, some more family stuff came up, and then my girlfriend had gotten extremely sick, and then right after that happened, pretty much I ended up getting really sick. I'm still a little sick right now, so you'll have to forgive me if I'm the same way.
I'm getting over mine.
Yeah, I came down with strep throat. I haven't had strep throat since I was a child, and it still has a little burn, but then we all ended up getting sick, and now Christmas is right around the corner, so
everything gets put off until at least January. I always think of January. This is when I start things. January.
Yeah, I mean that's gonna end up being where I start things as well, because then the YouTube channel also got hacked when I got strep throat on the same day. So I made the very fatal mistake of while my income is diversified, it's funneled through YouTube, and a lot of the income comes from the books. So when the YouTube channel got taken down, the book sales plummet because there was nothing to promote it. And I made the mistake of not promoting it on Instagram because I was so worried about getting the YouTube channel back. That's all I was focused on. So essentially, needless to say, this month I'm not getting paid essentially, and the wall is going to have to wait pretty much like you said till January, and until all that gets figured out.
Well, yeah, I'm glad that all got figured. Was your channel, when it came back, was it exactly the way you left it, or was it missing?
It was exactly the way they left it. Thumbnail, the top banner of your YouTube channel, that was changed. The YouTube name was changed.
What about all the videos?
All private. I lost one video. One video was deleted.
So they just privated them? They didn't delete them? Well, that's weird. I wonder why they did that. I would have deleted your videos if I had hacked it.
Honestly, same. I was very surprised, and the way I discovered that they were privated was weird, because I discovered they were privated before I got the channel back. And I learned about it because the same area where you're able to check your YouTube, or I'm sorry, your Google activity, you can see what apps are connected to your Google account, and YouTube counts as one of those. And underneath the YouTube logo, it says how many videos you have uploaded. So in that option, I was able to see like 700 and something videos uploaded, and I was like, oh, so the channel is, the videos are still there. They're just all private.
And you just got the silver play button recently too.
Yeah.
What about that? Huh?
It's still a little mind blowing. It's still.
Where do you have it? Is it in your shop?
It's right on the bookshelf, on my art bookshelf right now. Nice. I don't have like the best of place to mount it over here. Yeah. So I gotta find a place for it.
So what I want to get into here is this business about AI art. Okay. So this fascinates me, absolutely fascinates me. Same. Because it is a huge can of worms and a huge discussion about artificial intelligence creating art. And you kind of kicked it off on your channel with a poll or just a question asking your community, what do you think of AI art? Is it even art? And you got some interesting responses. You made a video on it. This is a topic that is going to affect us sooner than we think. It's always been one of these things where like, someday, there may be artificial intelligence, but it's here now. I use that. There's that one, I don't remember which one it's called, where you just type in some, it's fun, really. You type in some phrases or something, make me an art of, and it does these crazy surrealist looking paintings. You can pick like the type of style you want, impressionist or whatever. Bam, it spews out art.
It's there for you. It's just automatic pretty much.
And I think you had some interesting takes from people, because I would guess that the number one response is that art needs to have a soul behind it. There has to be a person.
Yeah, I don't really, in regards to any arguments in general, I don't like arguments that are solely based on like abstract, non-provable things. Like art needs a soul. Like what does that mean?
Yeah. Well, right? then you have to ask yourself, what is a soul? Do we have a soul? What if you don't?
Yeah, like there's that in itself becomes a can of worms.
Yeah, exactly.
That in itself becomes its own argument. Yeah. So my issue with that whole entire argument is there is a bunch of soulless art out there. Like every single day I do my fundamental studies, and none of that has any soul behind it. I'm drawing cubes. I'm drawing spheres. I'm drawing, all these different forms and shading them. It's still art, but none of it has any soul. So where does that draw the line? You can't really at that point say art needs a human aspect or it needs a soul behind it, because there's too much soulless art that's already out there. I mean, people are taping bananas to walls and, it's still art. You may not like it, but it's still technically art. It may not have a soul.
Well, I was a graphic designer for years, and a lot of it was just garbage. I didn't like it, but it's what a client wanted, and I had no vested interest in this being great art or anything. It was basically putting together pretty pictures that they like, and selling it. So I don't know if it's art.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really what it boils down to. Is like exactly like you said. You have a lot of artists out there, like UI designers, right? For apps or for games, or whatever the case is. The UI interface is a piece of artwork because, like a graphic designer, they have to compose these elements. And where's the soul behind most of it?
Yeah. Do you think there's ever going to come a time where that's something that needs to be disclosed by a person who produces it? Because I mean, as of right now, when I think of AI art, you're looking at it on a screen, but what if AI art was actually putting paint on canvas? And which I'm sure it probably is. There probably is that sort of thing.
So in the video I made, I intentionally included predominantly AI art and then one or two pieces that were not AI art to see if anybody can point out the difference.
Really? I
And
didn't notice that.
Not a single person pointed anything out.
Oh, no way.
Not to mention the fact, I also specifically looked for a piece of AI art that somebody printed out and then put into a gallery to see if anybody would point that out. Nobody pointed it out. So I think we're already at the point where like those lines are becoming severely blurred.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's no question that AI art can certainly be used very maliciously, but I don't see how it's any different than people maliciously using a projector.
Mm.
You know, like my whole entire debate in regards to AI art isn't whether or not it's you know, it can be used maliciously, but rather why are we making a big deal about some of these things when we've already faced these exact same problems for decades?
Mm-hmm.
People can, you know, maliciously trace images and claim it as their own. A lot of people already do that. Nobody's bringing attention to it, right? People can maliciously take someone's image and then copy it. People already do that.
And we see this in all forms of art. You see this in music. People are claiming that, hey, you've taken parts of my song. And
that's kind of my whole thing is like, we already have, you know, all these issues. AI art isn't doing anything special or new in regards to the issues it's bringing to the table.
Right.
So I don't see why people are kind of jumping the gun on AI art.
Yeah.
For that reason.
Yeah, it's drawing from all these sources throughout the internet to create the picture that you describe you would like it to be. But if you went to an artist to paint a picture that you described the things to him, he would still probably go to various sources to draw upon those images, or even sources that are in his mind from the past. We're drawing, sometimes we draw upon this stuff subconsciously. I've made projects before where people have called me up on it and said, "You just copied this other guy." And I'm like, "What? How is that?" And sure enough, it looks like his. And I'm like, I did a clock years ago that looked like another woodworker's clock. And he had made it a few years before. I didn't see it, or maybe I did and just subconsciously forgot about it. I don't know.
I find it really interesting how people will kind of take something and run with it and just leave it at that. And I think it goes right back to what you had started the podcast off with, where people tend to fear or dislike the thing that they don't really understand.
Yeah. We also get hung up on this notion of, is something art or is it not art? And I don't even think that is that even a relevant question? I don't know, because nobody can really define art. I mean, it's not like porn, you know. I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it, you know.
I'm not gonna lie, I disagree on that.
Okay.
While I do think the question of whether or not it is art or not is irrelevant. I don't think that's really a relevant question to ask. But all art forms follow these three pillars of art that come together in order to make art. And anything that follows those three pillars could be art, which, you know, leaves a wide range of things that could be art. But AI art very definitively falls under that, right? So not to go off the deep end and explain the entirety of the three pillars of art, you essentially have like the first pillar, which is the elements of art: line, shape, form, value, space, color, texture. Everything that is art needs to have some of those. It's not physically possible to create art without that. You have the art form specific fundamentals, which defines and separates different art forms. Every single art form needs to have this in order to exist in the first place. And then you have techniques, which is how you go about performing or creating the art. In the case of AI art, the AI itself is the technique, which doesn't necessarily require any effort of the artist, but there's already plenty of art forms like that as well that don't require the effort of the artist. Like, I think it's pronounced sumunagashi. I might be pronouncing that incorrectly, but you essentially, you know, put ink into water and then you dip the paper into it and you have a nice, beautiful, abstract piece of work. There's not much effort in that. I did that for many years. And there's not much effort in regards to that.
But it's definitely art.
But it's definitely art. It's beautiful too. You know, so there's art forms that share the same level of effort, but they're still very clearly art.
And I suppose there's some people challenging even that. The people who put up maybe a blank canvas.
Yeah.
It's art.
I mean,
because the concept is there. You're thinking, okay, well, I'm just challenging you. And if I'm challenging you to look at this, then it is art. I don't know.
Yeah, I've actually seen that where somebody wouldn't paint a canvas, but they'll hang it up into a gallery, and it's literally a blank canvas, and they're like, "That's the work."
You know what's really cool? Have you done this Chat GPT thing? It's been going around. This is it's an artificial intelligence engine that you can. I don't even know how to describe it. You can ask questions of it. You can tell it to do things. It's remarkable. So. Before this show, I asked it, tell me, this is written by completely generated on the spot by artificial intelligence. I just gave it the prompt. Tell me how Jon Grim critiques graffiti art. Here's how it responded. And tell me how accurate this is, okay? As a graffiti artist, Jon Grim is always looking for ways to improve and hone his craft. When it comes to critiquing graffiti art, Jon approaches the process with a critical eye and an open mind. He looks for elements such as composition, color balance, and use of techniques and styles. First, Jon will take a step back and observe the piece as a whole. He'll consider the composition and how the elements of the piece work together. Does the graffiti art have a clear focal point, or is the viewer's eye drawn all over the place? Is the composition balanced, or are there areas that feel too crowded or empty? Next, Jon will focus on the use of color. Does the piece use a cohesive color palette, or are the colors all over the place? Is the color balance pleasing to the eye, or are there areas that feel too harsh or overwhelming? Finally, Jon will consider the techniques and styles used in the piece. Is the graffiti art well executed, or are there areas that feel sloppy or rushed? Does the piece show a clear understanding of the graffiti art style being used, or does it feel like the artist is just going through the motions? Overall, Jon tries to provide constructive feedback and suggestions for improvement rather than just criticizing the work. He wants to help other graffiti artists grow and improve, and he knows that critiques are an important part of the learning process.
I'm not gonna lie, that sounds like something somebody wrote in college for a report. Right? When you're like trying to hit a certain word threshold.
It kind of does, doesn't it? So the conversation around these things is like, you could produce this, depending on how you word your question and how complex it is, that you could basically hand in an essay using
I'm
AI.
starting to contemplate going to college now and just have AI do all my homework. You know?
I know. Well, and so what I've heard is that now some like high school teachers are requiring you can only turn in prompts, written on by pencil and paper. I guess even then you could copy it, or that you have to do it in class so they can see what you're doing. But see, I think that kind of defeats the point, because this cat is already out of the bag, and this is just in the infancy. So this is going to get
much better,
way better. That it sort of begs the question of what real benefit is there to have a human write something that a machine can do in a split second just as well.
Yeah, this is actually something that somebody argued on the video or on the Instagram questionnaire that I put out. But that essentially was it. Why would we bother doing art if we're going to be replaced by AI and they can do it better? I think at the moment, I can't speak for the future, but I think at the moment, humans are much better storytellers. And a lot of art, be it, an oil painting that somebody might commission, like the one that's unfinished back here, whether it's concept art or whatever the case is, we can compose elements, values, colors in a way that tells a story a lot better than what AI can do. If you try to go ahead and have AI generate, even if it's like, say, comic panels that need to follow a sequence of events, it may not be able to tell that story as good as a human can. Now, will it be able to do that in the future? Probably. Mm-hmm. But, that's yet to be seen.
I had this idea. Do you think this might ever happen? It's probably going to happen. is like a graffiti drone.
What do you
You
mean?
could have a
Like the
drone
flying?
with actual paint. You could fly
it's
it up
already
to
happened.
like the top of a building and just start
Yeah,
adding graffiti.
it's already happened.
Really?
There's graffiti Instagram accounts. I love them. They're crazy. These people have the imagination and the know-how in order to like build some of the stuff is ridiculous. It's crazy. But I saw one a couple of years ago. So this is pretty old, where they attached spray cans and some kind of device in order to make the spray paint on a drone, and they very albeit very sloppily, because it can't be easy in order to control the actual drone and draw at the same time.
Yeah.
But we're doing exactly that.
Wow. Well, you know what's going to happen is somebody will write some code, and somebody will come up with hardware specifically designed for spray paint in a drone that you can sit at your computer and feed it a design that you want, send it up to the top of a bridge. Done.
Almost like
it's
a
gone.
mobile printer.
Yeah.
Like the drone becomes an airborne printer of sorts. You just send it to the location and it prints out your hand style. Or your
How would
Zoe
you feel about? How do you think graffiti artists would feel about that?
Graffiti artists would hate it.
I would think so, right?
And you know what? I wouldn't blame them at all.
Yeah,
because
you've taken all of the risk, all of the.
Yeah. Like when it comes up to for anybody who may not be graffiti artists, or anybody who's new to the terminology, it's known as getting up. When it comes to getting up or doing graffiti illegally, for the purposes of getting your name more recognized and getting it out there, when it comes to that, it's all about the risk, and that's where all the respect comes from. So if you aren't taking the risk, then it's like, what's the point? Then again, who would know? Who would know that you have a drone out there doing your tags for you? Unless they physically see it, who would know?
Right. But all of your tags would look identical. You'd have to have some way of mixing it up a little bit.
I question if people would even realize that.
Yeah.
Unless they take photographs of it and then they kind of like look at it side to side.
This is sort of the thing, and this is also a similar topic that we have in woodworking and making is digital tools. It's also kind of a controversial topic because we have CNC machines that can cut perfect pieces of wood. All you do is sit at your computer, you design it, feed it to the machine, it cuts it out. There's laser cutters that'll also cut the things out perfectly. And I've given this so much thought over the years, over the past 10 years, as this technology has grown to the point where it's very common in even just garage hobbyists' shops, is that the question people like to pose is it still woodworking? And I don't think that's the question to ask, because sure, you're making something out of wood, it's woodworking. It doesn't matter whether you're using a power saw, power tools, or stone knives. You're still carving wood. The tool doesn't really matter. But with digital tools, I've kind of come to think that in a way, they lost their handmade, for a better word, charm. That if you want something to look perfect, just buy factory made. Go to IKEA, because there's basically all made by factory. There's no flaws in it. But if you're building something by hand, it's going to have things that aren't perfect in it. And it's sort of those flaws that show that a human was involved in this thing and, again, give it a soul, so to speak.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The whole entire aspect of allowing for human error, I think, is a pretty good point. And if people perceive that as being the soul of a piece of work, that's a lot more acceptable and tangible. That's something I can kind of digest a little better than some abstract, whatnot. But I think that's a good point, is allowing for that kind of human error. I think it's very similar to how digital programs can automatically do a lot of effects from art, like drop shadow, cast shadows. You can simulate those. Perspective. Artists nowadays don't have to learn those things. But I think the issue comes in from the artist having the capacity to do those things on their own, but using the tool to kind of speed the process, and then having an artist who's always used the tool and therefore does not know how to do the specific technique. As I'm sure you've probably seen in woodworking already, you've probably seen a lot of woodworking, amateurs who have completely depended on these higher technology kind of things and whatnot, and they don't know how to do certain woodworking techniques that are considered basic, right? Like nowadays in art, you have people who don't know how to do a basic drop shadow, and they've been doing art for, at this point, 10 years. They have professional careers and they don't know how to do these very basic things. And I think that's more so where the issue with AI art comes from. But as far as the whole entire, the human error being included in something, it does add a lot of charm. It does add a lot of charm.
I think it makes it something that makes something unique and valuable. That this is a one of a kind thing, but I don't know if it doesn't have to be everybody's goal to do that. I mean, there's certainly, and if you're in a production situation and you're cranking out furniture and you're just selling it, it doesn't need to be this beautiful piece of art. It doesn't matter. So it seems like that. So I think that these tools, there's still people, there's a resurgence right now of people using hand tools. I mean, there's certainly no reason why you should have to use a chisel and a plane, but people are finding enjoyment in doing that because it kind of, I don't know, it scratches that itch about having to just do things by hand. And I think that also might be part of it, is that even with power tools, when I'm using a table saw or a circular saw, I'm still using my hands to power the tool through the material rather than sitting in a different room and programming something to just cut.
Yeah. There's a certain level of detachment. And, and this is actually a question to you, because I'm sure similar things, and in fact, despite not knowing much of anything about woodworking, I'm pretty confident when I say, as it stands right now, forget like laser cut and programmed crafting of wood or art, both topics, because they're very similar in this aspect. Forget all of that and just pretend for a second we're back in like the 80s or 70s where you had to do everything a little bit more manually. Even back then, we had certain techniques and certain liberties that 100 years ago they would have looked at and went, you guys are cheating, you guys aren't doing this the right way, so on and so forth. So even the purists of today are exactly the same as the people with technology now, right? Like, for example, I don't know how to make my own oil paint. I know of the process, I know of the ingredients, but I've never sat here and actually made my own oil paint. Yeah. Right. I've never sat here and made my own mediums.
It was probably controversial at the time when you could start buying paint.
Exactly. Right. So I feel like there are certain things that in today's day and age, we have to learn how to utilize it in a responsible way and not in a more malicious way, if the malicious way exists. I don't think there's anything wrong with buying oil paints, but in the case of like AI art, for example, and handmade versus more programmed designs, I think as long as the artist is very clear about what it is they're doing, then there's not much of an issue.
I think we adapt. We always adapt to these things. Humans have a way of just figuring this shit out. When photography came out, there were predictions that, this is the end of the artist. Because why bother painting something when you can just take a picture of it? So what artists did is that kind of ushered in a more impressionistic style of art, because people are like, well, I don't want to paint a perfect apple. If I can just take a picture of an apple, why don't I do something special that this camera can't do? And it does sort of, I guess, make sense that, if you want something done perfect, then use the tool that will give you that perfection.
Even as a hyper-realistic artist, because I do a lot of hyper-realism, even then, I think what you had previously said comes into play. Because as a hyper-realistic artist, people may look at a painting I've done and go, why don't you just take a photograph of the same thing?
But it's telling them more about you than the art.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you said about human error. There's been times where I've streamed the process of my hyper-realistic paintings, and I would have a glaring mistake in the painting. Like I have the abuse awareness painting I did, where I had to literally repaint her eye differently because I had completely botched it in the sketch phase. And it was like undoubtedly very wrong. I also had to fix her nose because I had messed up in the sketch in that. So I had to like actually go back and fix my human error. And there's still human errors in that. So if someone likes that aspect of art, if they like that more kind of human element to it, then it gives purpose to things like hyperrealism, where you wouldn't necessarily take a photo of the very same thing.
Right. It's like music and auto-tune. You know, I think that we're kind of starting to swing back the other way, where people enjoy hearing those slight flaws and fluctuations in people's voices. It's like why we go to live events and concerts, because the world doesn't need to be auto-tuned, at least all the time. I don't know, maybe for commercials or something. You know, I think like for commercial use, these kind of things sort of make sense.
So what you're telling me is you're not an avid T-Pain fan.
Well, see, you know, there you go. That it sort of makes sense when you take the auto-tune to its extreme, and then it becomes its own sound.
Yeah.
But this, where they're just like, they're taking every voice now, it just always is filtered through auto-tune, just as slight corrections of the notes, and you know, to make it perfect.
Yeah.
Even all instruments, that just to keep the timing, the drums, everything correct and perfect. And I don't know.
Would you compare that, or would you agree and say that that's very similar to an artist using, say, for example, a projector or AI in order to produce artwork, and then saying, yeah, I made this, you know, I am the original artist, and so on and so forth, where there's no longer that, you know, that genuine forthcoming, hey, I used these tools to do the thing. Like some singers might say, oh yeah, I just sing this good, but we all know
we all know it's auto-tune.
Yeah, we
you ain't fooling nobody, Miley Cyrus.
That's it. You're gonna get a tweet from her.
I'm gonna hear from Miley. Miley, I'm gonna get you on this show. We're gonna talk about auto-tune. I don't know if she uses auto-tune. I'm sure she does. I would imagine like
sure
all pop
musician.
stars, they all do now. It's just the thing. Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I said, well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I need that level of perfection.
I definitely can't sing, so I couldn't tell you.
I would definitely. I would need
it.
If I were gonna sing, definitely. But you know what I'm doing is I'm noticing graffiti everywhere. Ever since I had you on the show last time, now I'm an expert on graffiti. So I'm driving like through Oakland, and I see them like on the freeway overpasses, and some beautiful, amazing work actually up there. And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty good, but I think the drop shot of the lighting is going just a little bit wrong.
Meanwhile, the guy is like terrified. You know, he's on the freeway, cars passing by, and he's like, "Oh man," trying to paint this drop shadow.
I feel like I know everything about graffiti now, but I want to reiterate that graffiti doesn't have to be an illegal act. Graffiti is just a form of art. For anybody who didn't listen to that first episode that you were on, you can put graffiti. That's why I'm going to put graffiti in my shop right behind me here. But it's my shop. It's not illegal.
Which, to be fair, I completely understand a lot of people's distaste for graffiti, because it's a relatively new art form. You know. Yeah.
But do you think they have a distaste for the art form or for the act?
Well, that's exactly the point, right? Is a lot of people associate the two so strongly together to where they seem inseparable. Like for them, the act is the art form and the art form is the act. You know, so for them, there is no separation. And like I said previously, some of these people, they come into the videos and they'll just be like, oh, why don't you delinquents just do it legally? And I'm like... In the first 5 seconds of the video, I say I don't promote doing graffiti illegally. Yeah, you know, so for many people, it's just not something that's very separable.
Yeah, I mean, if you were doing that illegally on your channel, eventually YouTube's going to take it down. Eventually, but there are guys who are doing it.
Yeah.
Because I watch them.
You're 100% correct. Yeah, eventually. It's specifically why I don't do graffiti on my, or let me rephrase, it's not specifically why, because I don't do graffiti illegally at all anymore. Yeah. But when I very first started the channel, it was something I considered, where I was like, is this something I want on my channel? Because I used to even make tutorials about how to do graffiti illegally. And I put a stop to that once I made an Instagram account, and I saw the people, like I physically was able to see into the lives of the people that watch my content. And I was like, there's 8-year-olds watching this.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, no more on my channel.
Yeah. Plus, eventually, YouTube they have a terms of service that you can't show or promote anything illegal, or you can't. That's kind of and it will come around. All it takes is a few cranky people to start flagging your videos. But there's this guy in France. I don't remember what his name is. You've probably seen the guy. Goes around tagging stuff. He hasn't posted in a long time. I don't know if he's still around. It's been a couple months, but he would go around. And it's fascinating watching these videos, and I have such mixed emotions watching that, because I kind of think, God, it kind of sucks, but it's oddly fascinating to watch how he goes around tagging and putting stickers up.
Yeah, it's entertaining. Like, I find myself watching some, and then there's some where I'm just like, I don't see the point. Like, somebody will tag on somebody's car, just a regular pedestrian's car, and I'm sitting there like,
no.
what?
No,
Why would you do that?
No. Yeah, I would totally draw the line there.
Yeah. I mean, there's literally rules in graffiti that state not to do things like that, which I know it sounds weird, right? Rules in graffiti to not break the law. What is that? But, there is like a code of honor, if you will. And I'm putting parentheses because I don't know what else to call it. And it sounds ridiculous to call it a code of honor, but that's kind of what it is. And it like says not to do things like that. Yeah.
There's ethics involved in it.
Yeah.
I watched that show. I forget what it's called. It came out in the 80s, the movie about the New York graffiti. What's the name of that?
Style Wars?
Style Wars, yeah.
Yeah, Style Wars is like the visual graffiti Bible.
Yeah.
Like, you are not considered a graffiti artist until you watch that video. It's that important.
It was eye-opening to see these guys really, they were passionate about what they were doing, tagging those trains.
Oh, that was a completely different time back then. It's crazy to see like how graffiti's changed, because how graffiti's changed from how it is currently to going back a decade to then going back another decade, so on and so forth. My dad was doing graffiti back in New York at that time of Style Wars. Actually, maybe before, because Style Wars came out like a good 10 years after my dad. But my dad was doing graffiti back in 72 in New York, and my graffiti mentor was doing it back in 74 in New York. And the stories that they share are nothing like graffiti nowadays. Like, they'll tell stories about how the Vandal Squad, a specialized police force, would carry light bulbs with them. Not flashlights, but just the bulb. And when they saw a graffiti artist in the trains, they would take the light bulbs and they would throw them at the floor as they chased the graffiti artist, because it sounded like gunshots.
Oh, so, that's right. They would pop.
So, it would scare the graffiti artists off, and they thought that they were being shot at, so they would run away.
Oh, that's hard.
And like, you just don't get that nowadays. Never have I had a cop chase me throwing light bulbs at me,
That is pretty weird. You get glass all over the place. It's fine. We'll get somebody to clean that up.
I trip, scrape my elbow, get nothing but light bulbs, and then I'm looking at it like, what?
Wow. Do you ever still get the urge to just go out and just tag stuff? You're not going to tell me, are you?
100%. A sponsor gave me all these markers, and I told them in the sponsor email, I'm not going to use them, because those markers are for tagging. That's what they're for. And I'm like, I'm not going to use them. And I'm like, yeah, sure, you're not going to use them. And
wink. Like, really?
Like, all right. So they sent them over, and sometimes, I'll just have them there and I'll look at them and I'll be like, man, I wish I still did sometimes, but
you're really smart the way you approach your videos, because you make that very clear. This is I do not condone illegal activity. I'm focused on the art here. And the critiques you do, though, are real good. I really enjoy those a lot. I think those have been a big hit on your channel, haven't they?
Yeah. I used to do critiques of the actual community's artwork, and I stopped doing that because it became me repeating the same lessons, as I'm sure, because from my understanding, you taught some woodworking. Mm-hmm. You find yourself repeating a lot of the same stuff.
You do, yeah.
So...
Well, I look at it that not everybody... I've been saying the same things for 15 years now on YouTube. It's basically... I look at it as that for most people watching, it's the first time. They're new to it. You always have this feeling that everybody is completist, that they've seen everything you've done, when in fact it's really not the case.
Yeah, but and tell me if you agree or disagree. After doing the critiques for however many years I did them, something like 8 years or so, I decided to do the same content, but from a different perspective. And instead of critiquing the community's work in videos, which I still do in DMs, I still critique all their work for hours every day in DMs. But for videos specifically, breaking down professionals' work and analyzing that to provide the same information, but maybe from a different perspective, or maybe different lessons about the same topic, because now this professional is using it in more interesting ways that can teach people. Right, so I figured that was a better angle to take on the same concept.
I thought people were still sending you in.
Yeah, examples. No. They certainly do. Like I still do plenty of critiques on DMs and Instagram and whatnot, and
but not on
I do
YouTube?
that every single day.
I thought you were doing the YouTube series.
I don't do the critique series like I used to.
Oh, okay.
Like I won't. Oh, you might be talking about the rating fans videos. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I completely forgot about that.
Is that where people send you in, like, here's something I did. Let me know what's good and bad about it. Yeah.
Yeah. I completely forgot about that content. I'll
remind you about your channel.
yeah. But please do. Please remind me what videos I post so like that I can continue to do them. But yeah, that content is people love it. It's the same concept as what I used to do, but through a different perspective. So I have a friend on YouTube, a really nice guy named UFO, and that's actually a series that I saw him do, and people started requesting that I do the same. But I was already doing something similar. I was critiquing people's work. I just wasn't doing it through a rate your fans 1 through 10, which they seem to really enjoy that aspect. They like having like a
numbered rating. Yeah,
exactly. Something to kind of gauge and be like, all right, now I'm here. Which I can understand that, and it's good fun. So it allows me to kind of rapid fire critiques without having to sit there and make a 10-minute video about one specific thing.
What do you think is the one biggest mistake people make? If you had to
style,
they tried
hands down, style, 100%. Style is the ultimate obstacle. If you ask me, it's the ultimate obstacle of all art. Style is just absolute cancerous for new artists.
What do you mean by that? They're trying to find a style ahead of understanding fundamentals?
Yeah, exactly. You did a lot of graphic design, like you had said. Any professional artist in any field, whether it's cooking, whether it's dancing, whether it's graffiti, whether it's fine art, hyperrealism, comic books, concept art, woodworking, anyone will tell you have to learn the fundamentals of whatever it is you're doing. Otherwise, how are you meant to create within that domain? If you're trying to consistently circumvent that process by forcing style, you're either A, going to get really frustrated because you're not making any progress because you haven't learned the fundamentals, or B, you're never going to find style. And that's the issue most artists have. We'll use realism because we all know what realism looks like. You'll have these artists who come in and they'll try to draw, people in different poses and whatnot, that they'll try to draw these really, really technical scenes, but they don't understand a basic form. They don't understand how that form exists in perspective. They don't understand all of these things that would make that image possible. They don't have the prerequisite knowledge. And style is just you taking the fundamentals and then exaggerating them to your preferences. But if you don't know the fundamentals, how are you meant to exaggerate them? You can't. The fundamentals are prerequisite to style.
It's got to be one of the most, like you said, common mistakes people make, but I think it's very human, because when we start something, we sort of want to make ourselves, our own work, different. We want to do something that's going to be completely different than what I've seen. I've been watching all this stuff. I'm going to do it differently. And so I see this in woodworking all the time. I'm on this really big kick right now of simplicity, trying to find simplicity. And honestly, I find that trying to get to a place of simplicity is very difficult. That we almost always, as humans, start from a place of complexity, that we want to complicate things when we start things. And when I see new woodworkers build things, they always overcomplicate things to begin with. And I do the same thing. If I'm designing something, it always starts out overcomplicated, and then I have to work on it and work on it and work on it to get it stripped down to simplicity. And people are drawn to simplicity, even though you don't realize it.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think, and maybe listeners, can lend their perspective, but from the perspective of teaching, you get to see that a lot. You really get to see, newer artists of any kind jump in and immediately overcomplicate things. I know I did, for example, when I very first started. It was weird because I do fine art and I do graffiti. With fine art, I kept things simple pretty much from the start. With graffiti, I spent my first 6 years in graffiti never studying the fundamentals and overcomplicating everything and trying to add style as much as possible. So I 100% fell into that for 6 years. But you're right. You really are. You start from a place where it's more complex. You have like this grandiose idea in your head, and you want to bring it to life. And
we want to be the one different artist who's creating this something totally unique when you're approaching it wrong. I think I talked about this in my newsletter last month about how the simplicity, I think, is often considered people when they're starting some sort of form of art, they think, well, simplicity, that just is a sign that you're a beginner, that you don't know what you're doing because you don't have all these fancy techniques. When in fact, the total opposite is true. If you can achieve real simplicity in your art and style, that's a sign of sophistication.
Yeah, 100%. Could not agree more. Like, the amount in which I agree with you is off the charts. that you hit the nail on the head.
And it only comes from just years of experience. It only comes from understanding that, and you're not trying to show off. You're not trying so hard, but it takes a lot of work to find that simplicity. It really does.
Yeah, it's also not easy to do, right? Because I feel like people hear, the word simplicity, and they go, "Oh, well, it must be simple."
Yeah, and
it is quite the opposite.
Right. Or it's like entry level or beginners or childish or something, but that's not really what we mean by simplicity at all.
I feel like in art, that's when you have kids that will walk through a museum and they'll be like, "Oh, I can do that. Oh, I can do that." Which I'm not ashamed to say I was definitely one of those back in high school. Yeah. And then it turned out I couldn't do any of it.
Right. If you can do it, do it. See if you can get your painting hung on there. They have people pay millions of dollars for it.
Yeah.
Hey, we don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to get into this for you, but I'll just touch on it briefly because we'll have you back again next time. We can talk about more of this. But do you have any thoughts on these super glue people? This whole business about people super gluing themselves to paintings?
I'll be honest. All right. If I can I ask you more about this? Because I haven't seen anybody superglue himself, but I have seen people throw paint at paintings recently.
Okay,
is that the same kind of?
Well, sort of. But what they've been doing is there's like these oil protests where they superglue their hands to paintings, famous paintings, and they'll also throw things at. The first one that I saw was they threw tomato soup at.
I saw that.
But the weird thing is they didn't throw it, if I remember right, they didn't throw it at wouldn't you want to throw that at Andy Warhol's Campbell's soup paint? Wouldn't that? And it's like, why soup? If you're protesting oil, to me, you would want to throw oil, or you would want to throw it at an oil painting. See, they need help with their messaging. They need a better marketing team.
They need a better marketing team for their activism.
Anyways, I guess the crux of the matter is that they're basically getting slapped on the wrist for this because they're not damaging. They're only doing this on paintings that have glass on it, so the painting itself
they're not really
isn't
committed to the
well,
cause.
And that's another thing I thought is like, well, then you're not really putting yourself at much risk doing this.
That's kind of like, not going the full mile.
You're not exactly Rosa Parks here.
Yeah,
you're you're not really making that much of.
They're not very active about their activism.
Yeah.
That's wild. I don't know.
It seems to be a real fad the last month or so. Man, oh man, it's
why
it's become
why
a trend.
oil paintings though? Like,
well,
is
no,
oil
it's about
paintings...
they're protesting big oil companies that they're destroying the land, but which is fine. I can't disagree with a lot of what they're saying. I don't understand the messaging. Again, I don't understand the concept of gluing yourself to the glass on a painting.
I'm also just confused why the paintings.
I don't understand that. I think, okay, so this is what I think what they're saying is that we shouldn't be concerned about looking at art when we've got bigger problems to deal with.
All right. I mean, this may be a pretty crap comparison, but are they coming at Instagram with the same energy? Like,
well, that's a lot of what people think is that these are just like attention-seeking.
That's what it seems like to me. Because if you're concerned about like, oh, people are looking at beautiful artwork, well, then I mean, yeah. I feel like there's a lot of other things you can kind of protest that are at the same level.
Exactly. And it's always one of these things is how can you support this one thing when this other thing needs, attention? It's kind of, I don't understand the idea that it seems to be dismissed because they can, these very priceless paintings, even though they're behind glass, they're kind of dismissing it. Well, it wasn't harmed, but does that mean it's okay to do anything to those paintings? It doesn't seem right just because it hasn't been harmed.
It's only a matter of time as well before somebody takes the opportunity to do it to a painting that isn't behind glass.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
but see, that's the person that I actually have as from a protest standpoint. That's a person with balls.
Yeah.
That's a person who's committed.
Well, I don't think somebody should do that.
No.
If somebody did that, I'd be like, well, there you go. That's how it's done. But like they have paintings that have been damaged before, like that one kid who accidentally leaned on a painting and put a hole through it. There are paintings out there that they could target without glass.
Totally. Yeah.
I just don't understand why they would go about it the way that they are. And I feel like, in all honesty, while they're in, while the thing they disagree with, while the thing that they're protesting might be justified, the protest itself is kind of stupid. For lack of a better way of putting it, the protest itself is incredibly dumb.
You have any thoughts on NFTs? That's probably old hat by now, isn't it?
Yeah. At this point, I feel like I don't understand the technology behind it. I mean, we all know I'm not great with technology. I just got hacked. But I don't understand the technology behind NFTs. Wildly deep. But I try to listen to both sides of the argument, and it seems like the technology behind it, while it may not be refined now, it seems like it might be something that's pretty useful in the future.
That's kind of my take on it, yeah. That we just don't fully understand that usually when something is brand new, people kind of overdo it. Kind of like auto-tune. It was just overdone, and then it finds its place.
Yeah, I think this comes around full circle right back to the AI art as well, right? When you open up the podcast, you said people who don't understand something tend to, fear it. But I think it's much the same. Like we haven't really refined it just yet. It might be great in the future. As it stands, I'm pretty disinterested. Like, I think some of the art I've seen from NFTs has been really cool, but the majority of it is pretty crap. Which goes for about just any art form in general, right?
Well, so much of it just feels on the NFTs feels real scammy too, because I was looking at one of these places where you can buy and sell NFTs. It's like crypto adjacent is kind of the NFT market. But
don't you buy some NFTs with crypto?
Yeah, you hear about people who, an NFT sold for $1 million or whatever, but like 99.9% of them are just languishing on this site for 1 penny or something. No, they just sit there because everybody's trying to jump in. Look at this. I've got another, monkey doing
Well, now they actually have artists who are physically painting replicas of NFTs and then putting that into galleries.
Well, see, that's kind of cool. I kind of like that idea.
and then those are selling, and it's like, well, I mean, this also comes right back around to the conversation about AI art and art theft, which a lot of people have issue with AI.
Well, I'm going to have you on again, John.
It's always fun.